Thanks for tuning in. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. I woke up early that morning, a little on edge. My mind kept jumping between the day ahead and the fact that Hannah, my wife, would be back today. She'd been away for several weeks on business, and the house had felt way too quiet without her. I wanted everything to be perfect for her return. I had the coffee ready, the living room all tidied up, and I even draped her favorite blanket over the armchair, just how she likes it. When I heard the door open, my heart skipped a beat. There she was, standing in the hallway, bathed in the soft morning light that filtered through the windows. Her smile was tired but still so warm. I rushed over and pulled her into a hug, holding her close. "Welcome home, Hannah," I whispered. She hugged me back tightly, resting her head on my shoulder. "It feels so good to be back," she said quietly. After a moment, she pulled away just a little, reached into her bag, and handed me something. It was a small white stick. "I've got some news for you," she said, her face lighting up with a smile. "I'm pregnant." I stared at her, trying to process what she had just said, and looked at the object in her hand. A mix of shock and excitement washed over me. "Hannah, are you serious? This is wow." I took her hand and held it, trying to make sense of it all. "Yes, we're going to be parents, Dylan," she said, nodding and brushing away a tear from her eye. "Isn't that worth celebrating?" She kissed me quickly, squeezing my hand. Even though I was thrilled, a small feeling of doubt crept into my mind. We hadn't been very close lately, not since before she left for her trip. I almost said something, but she just laughed and waved it off, mentioning that the timing could be off sometimes and that she'd scheduled a doctor's appointment to confirm everything. I nodded, trying to push the uneasy feeling aside, but it still lingered. I grabbed my coat and briefcase for work, but even as I walked to the office, her news was all I could think about. I couldn't quite shake the doubt, no matter how hard I tried. Once I got to my office, I could hardly focus on the pile of contracts or the emails waiting for me. Instead, my mind wandered back to the story of how I met Hannah. It felt like it happened just yesterday. I remembered that night 5 years ago, at a company celebration when I was promoted to senior manager. The room was crowded, full of colleagues, the air buzzing with chatter. I felt proud, but when I saw Hannah, everything else faded away. She was laughing and talking with Jason Palmer, a guy I didn't get along with much. Jason was one of those people who liked to take credit for everything, even if he didn't deserve it. There was always a little rivalry between us, even though we respected each other's skills. That night, Jason was being his usual loud, arrogant self, holding onto Hannah's arm like she was some prize. I could tell he was trying to stake his claim on her, and I wasn't having it. I walked over, and before long, Hannah and I were talking, laughing about random things. Jason stood there, impatient and irritated. Hannah was different, smart, funny, and easy to talk to. I was drawn to her instantly. As the evening went on, Jason's bragging became annoying, and I noticed Hannah's interest starting to fade. When Jason finally left to talk to a group of executives, I offered to get her a drink. She smiled, clearly relieved. From there, things just fell into place. We exchanged numbers, went on coffee dates that turned into dinners, and spent hours talking. We laughed late into the night and spent weekends exploring the city together. I'd never felt so connected to anyone before. Hannah was kind and thoughtful, and I felt like I finally found someone who really saw me. A year into dating, I knew I couldn't wait any longer. One night, we were walking along the beach, the moonlight reflecting on the water. I turned to her, took her hand, and asked her to marry me. She said yes, her face lighting up with the most beautiful smile. After we got married, I bought us a house near the ocean. It wasn't huge, but it was perfect for us. We spent hours fixing it up, arranging furniture, picking out paint colors. It became our home. On quiet evenings, we'd sit on the porch, watching the waves roll in, talking about everything. Our dreams, our fears. Even when we argued over things like chores or the way we organized the kitchen, we always found our way back to each other. I thought about all of that now, as I stood there with Hannah, wondering if we were about to start a new chapter with this baby. But the doubt still gnawed at me, even as I tried to push it away. I wanted to believe her. I loved her, but something about the timing didn't sit right. Were things really adding up? I didn't say anything to Hannah about how I was feeling. I decided to brush it off for now, trusting her. But when I got home later that evening, the moment felt almost too perfect. The house smelled like her cooking. She'd made us a romantic dinner. Wine for me, sparkling water for her. All of our favorite dishes. We laughed and talked about our day, and everything felt normal again. Hannah seemed more excited than ever, glowing with happiness. After dinner, she took my hand and gave me a smile. "Let's go upstairs," she said, her voice soft. I hesitated for a second, thinking about the pregnancy, but she reassured me. "Oh, Dylan, I already checked with the doctor. He said everything's safe for us." That night, I tried to forget about the nagging feeling inside me. But 2 days later, when Hannah came back from her doctor's appointment, she told me something that made my stomach drop. "The doctor said I'm about 4 weeks along," she said, smiling. I did the math in my head, and everything inside me twisted. There was no way we'd been intimate 4 weeks ago. I carefully brought it up to her, but Hannah just brushed it off, telling me I must have forgotten. She was so smooth, almost like she had rehearsed the explanation. I nodded and pretended to believe her, but deep down, my suspicions were growing stronger. Days passed, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. And then, something else happened. I started to feel a weird irritation in my groin, something that didn't seem normal. It got worse, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. I decided to go to the doctor myself, without telling Hannah. Something was definitely off, and I needed to figure it out. I decided to take a few tests, hoping it was nothing serious, but when the results came back, it hit me like a ton of bricks. I had contracted an STD. The news stunned me, and suddenly all the things I'd been ignoring and brushing aside became impossible to avoid. My doubts weren't just doubts anymore. They were real. I had to face them. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, and now I had a reason to worry. I knew I couldn't keep pushing it all down anymore. I needed answers. Hannah was out for the morning, and I saw my chance. I went through her things, hoping to find something that would make sense of everything. I opened her laptop and started digging through her emails. I looked through everything, documents, appointments, anything that might connect the dots between her trip and my suspicions. Hannah worked for a different company now, so I wasn't sure what I'd find. But what I came across made my heart drop. I found an itinerary for her recent business trip. As I read through the list of people attending, my stomach twisted. There it was, Jason Palmer. Jason. I hadn't even known he was still in the same field. It had been over a year since he left my company, and honestly, I hadn't thought about him much since. But now, here his name was, on the same list as Hannah's, for the same business event. It hit me hard. Jason wasn't just attending as a colleague. He was part of the team. And it all came flooding back. The rivalry, the arrogance, the way he'd acted at that party all those years ago when Hannah and I first met. Jason had always been competitive, and I'd always felt like he didn't like losing. He'd always been a show-off, especially around Hannah. Now I was left wondering, had Jason been waiting for a chance like this? Could it be that he saw this as his moment to get back at me? Was he using his new connection with Hannah to take revenge on me for taking her away from him? Or, worse, had something rekindled between them while I wasn't around? The thought of it made my head spin. It was starting to look like I wasn't just imagining things anymore. It felt like everything was clicking into place, and I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't prove anything yet, but it was hard not to see the signs of betrayal. The worst part wasn't even the thought of Hannah and Jason together. It was the possibility that Hannah could be tricking me, making me look like a fool. If she had a child with Jason and passed it off as mine, she could secure alimony and possibly get a large chunk of my assets. That idea ate at me. I had to protect myself. I couldn't just sit back and let it all fall apart. So I moved quickly. Within a few days, I made an appointment with a lawyer and a financial advisor. I laid everything out, the pregnancy, the strange behavior, and my suspicions about Hannah's connection with Jason. The lawyer, Ellen, wasted no time. She outlined a strategy to protect my finances and my property. Ellen suggested I set up a trust fund for my most valuable assets, my house, my retirement savings, and my stock portfolio. The trust would make it so Hannah couldn't claim them in a divorce, since I wouldn't technically own them anymore. The trust would hold everything for future heirs. Next, My financial advisor recommended transferring my savings to offshore accounts in places where privacy laws would protect it from legal claims. I also converted some of my savings into gold and collectibles, things I could keep in a vault. It wasn't the most straightforward, but it was necessary. I needed to make it harder for Hannah to get her hands on anything. And the lawyer had one last suggestion. I should take out a loan against the house. That way, if Hannah tried to claim it, the house's value would be lower, making it less attractive in a divorce settlement. Lastly, Ellen told me to keep detailed records of everything. My interactions with Hannah, her strange behavior, and anything I could gather about Jason. If this went to court, I'd need proof. So I put it all into motion. I moved my savings, set up the trust, and began securing my assets. I was careful, didn't let anything slip. Everything had to look normal with Hannah, so I kept things light and played it cool. But I knew I couldn't stop there. I needed proof. So I hired a private investigator, David. He was quiet, thorough, and started right away. Hannah and Jason were careful, though. They didn't act openly romantic in public. But David still managed to catch a few moments, lingering glances, private lunches, and even a quiet evening at a small cafe. It wasn't much, but it was enough. They weren't just colleagues. It was clear something was going on. David didn't get much more than that, but I was ready. I couldn't wait any longer. I met with Ellen again. We finalized the divorce papers, making sure everything was covered. My assets would be protected, and Hannah would get a lot less than she was probably expecting. Once the papers were ready, I quietly packed my things and left. I didn't say a word to Hannah. I moved across the country, far away from everything we'd built together. I stayed in a quiet hotel, far from the mess I just created. I knew Hannah would eventually come back to an empty house, but I didn't care anymore. When she returned, she found the house exactly how I'd left it, empty. At first, she probably thought I was just working late or out with friends. But then she saw the envelope. The divorce papers inside were all I left her. No explanation, no note, just the papers. Hannah tried calling me, but my number was disconnected. She searched for me on social media, but I had vanished. Even our mutual friends didn't know where I was. I had disappeared, and now she was left with nothing. Meanwhile, I sat alone in my hotel room, trying to process everything. The betrayal, the trust that had been broken, the doubts that had gnawed at me. It was a lot to take in. I felt like the weight of it all was finally catching up to me, and I knew I needed a break. Somewhere quiet, somewhere I could finally clear my head. After a bit of searching, I found a small cabin deep in the woods. It wasn't much, but I didn't need anything fancy. I left my job, the office, and the memories of Hannah and Jason's betrayal. It was all too much to bear. The cabin was far away from everything. Surrounded by trees and open skies, it felt like the perfect place to be alone with my thoughts, a place where I could finally find some peace. When the divorce trial started, I didn't even show up. I stayed in touch with my lawyer, Ellen, only when necessary. She handled everything for me. Hannah, though, had no idea what she was walking into. She showed up to court, expecting things to go in her favor. But I had planned for this. The trust fund, the offshore accounts, the house value lowered. All of it was set up to keep Hannah from taking anything from me. All she had were the divorce papers, and her frustration. Hannah was furious. But there wasn't much she could do. The only card she had left to play was her pregnancy. She tried to use it to win sympathy, but I had prepared for that too. Ellen presented my medical records, proving I had contracted an STD, something Hannah couldn't deny. We also showed the photos and videos of her with Jason. That was all the proof we needed to show her infidelity. In a matter of minutes, Hannah's advantage was gone. She thought she could control the situation, but now she was cornered. Her plan, the life she imagined, was slipping out of her reach. And in that moment, she realized the truth. She had tried to fool me, but now she had nothing. After everything fell apart, Hannah tried to turn to Jason. She was desperate, hoping he would comfort her, but when she saw the anger in his eyes, her hope faded. Jason didn't hold back. "You ruined everything," he hissed, glaring at her. "I thought you'd have the sense to keep quiet about the pregnancy until we got everything sorted out. But no, you rushed into it. Now Dylan has shut us out completely." Hannah froze. She thought she and Jason were in this together, that they cared about each other. But Jason's cold words made her realize that she had been just a pawn in his game. He didn't look at her with love. He was frustrated. "You were supposed to help me take Dylan down," he snapped. "But you told him about the baby too soon. We could have lined everything up, but now it's all gone." He moved everything. "It's all gone." The weight of his words hit Hannah hard. She felt shame and fear crawl over her. She had thought Jason cared for her, but now it was clear. He just wanted revenge on me, and she was nothing more than a tool to get it. When she tried to speak, Jason cut her off. "I don't want anything to do with you anymore," he said coldly. "You ruined this whole thing." Hannah's heart sank. She thought that maybe, just maybe, the baby would make him stay. But Jason just laughed bitterly. "What baby?" he said, waving her off. "Who knows who you've been with? Don't pin that on me." He turned and walked away, leaving Hannah standing there, completely alone. 2 years passed. Hannah had given birth to a baby boy, and somehow, she managed to keep her life together, with help from her family. Her parents, her siblings, they all supported her when she needed it the most. But no matter how much help she got, she still felt empty. She tried to start fresh, even thought about dating again. But every attempt fell apart. Men just didn't stick around. And Jason? He had disappeared from her life entirely. Her days were lonely, and her nights were worse. She spent hours thinking about me, about how I was, about what could have been if she had made different choices. Guilt gnawed at her constantly, and the weight of everything she'd done was almost unbearable. Meanwhile, I had started over. I moved far away from everything, finding peace in nature. I spent my days solo camping, climbing mountains, and sharing my adventures and videos on a blog. It gave me fulfillment, and surprisingly, my videos started to gain a following. It wasn't much, but it provided me with steady income. I even got a dog, a loyal companion who went everywhere with me. At least he wouldn't betray me. One evening, I was reading through the comments on one of my latest videos when one stood out. It was from a woman, and her words stopped me in my tracks. "Dylan, I recognize you. I apologize for everything that happened. I was wrong. Please forgive me. Sorry for writing here. I have no other way to reach you. Just know that I regret it deeply." I didn't need to read her name to know it was Hannah. She must have stumbled across my blog, maybe by accident, or maybe she was searching for me. Her words stirred up a strange mix of emotions, nostalgia, and a bit of relief. The pain she caused still lingered, but I didn't feel angry anymore. I had moved on. I had found peace in my new life. I sat for a moment, thinking about it, then I replied to her comment. "I do not hold a grudge. God will judge us. Live happily." I hit send and closed my laptop, feeling a sense of closure. I had made peace with my past, and now I could move forward, free from bitterness, with only hope for the future. This is the end of today's story. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more captivating stories. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.